Yeah, precisely. That's what it is. And the sensation speaks like, can you see a noise? If it's the truth, if it's love flowing, I can see it. That's what I can see. That's what the gaze is looking at. The fucking eternal good thing. So you think you're in the dark, you actually just didn't see the thing yet, but like, that image just allows us to describe the seeing. That's all we're doing, describing the seeing.
Right.
So it's literally, to me, what the sensation of heat whispering means. That's what I have. And we just put all the words, the consequence, the words that are consequence of that heat whispering image. That's what I'm talking about with you, is the heat whispering. I'm seeing the noise of it. So it just seems like love is noisy, and the word noise just indicates the fact that we're aware. Oh shit, we're aware. This has a lot of exist. It has so much, it's almost too much. That's what means the buffer is overflowing. It's too much exist. It's fucking beyond. It's completely eternal. Complete, like it's finished and continues to be finished. Do you remember that phrase?
I think so.
I know that's in the mythos that I'm studying. Something that's so finished, it continues to be finished and is completely the thing we see, what it is. That's the action I am speaking about. So that's why we are dissatisfied with the actions of an institution called religion. Because what we're doing isn't done in an institution sense. It's done in the sense of right now, you're looking at.
It's like you described that when you do things for yourself, you live in a cage. I feel like because if you truly are loving, no one needs to tell you how to do it. No one needs to tell you how to love. You are shown how to love. Someone loves you, and then you feel that.
Right, because you send it out, and then they get it.
Love is not a list of rules or a list of actions that need to be followed to complete the task. Love is the opposite of that, and I think that's why people hate religion, because religion says, I'm going to teach you how to love. You don't teach somebody how to love, you show them what love is.
Yeah. So there's no teaching, there's only that thing where you show what it is. You point, right. You create the ability for it to be perceived. And you do that using an action that lets your truth be looked at. It lets your book be read. When you do that, you create something that can be read, somebody can read it, that happens, that's the transaction. They can then do the same exact motion from their center point, create that book, you read that book. You have now exchanged the power of your inmost love.
I feel that.
And after that part is unspeakable, because all the speaking is what took you. The speaking walked you up to that point, and you're standing there. You have the message, and you're standing on top of it. And what's in front of you is space. What's behind you is the message that took you there. That's a quiet moment, and heat is whispering. I created the words to say this.
I'm trying to grasp what you're saying. I think, for me, it's like the idea that I feel like some of us are lucky enough to be protected from the evil that the world has, but so many of us come into the world and it changes us. It does these things to us that we don't like, and so that makes us feel like we need to be defensive. We need to build up all these walls. We need to live inside this cage. And maybe we do things for ourselves, but in our minds, we're protecting ourselves. And we meet people who express love without that. We see love being expressed without that cage. And maybe we've seen love before, but it was always through this cage. And so we kind of say, okay, well, love isn't real. It's this fake thing, or God isn't real. Religion is just all lies and this and that. But we finally experience someone expressing love without that cage, and we say, okay, that's really unique. I've never felt that way before. And not only do they seem like they're no longer trapped, but what they did has made me feel some type of way that I really like. And you almost have to have this faith, like, this isn't just a joke. And you start looking into it, and it's a slow process. It's not this, all of a sudden, I saw love me the other day. Now everything I have in life is totally solved, and I figured everything out. And you kind of go through this process of surrendering all the things that you put up around yourself to protect because you were not protected. And you reach this point where I feel like you're talking about, which is you're able to love, and maybe not everything, but enough of your cage is removed that you can feel love in this really tangible way, and you can love at the same time. And it's almost as if the love itself is like a being. It's like it's separate from you, and yet it is with you at all times. It inhabits you. It touches all the parts of you, and you know that even if you go through a period where you try to go back and build the cage back up, that you're never going to be the same again. Even if you try to harden your heart, you're never going to be the same again. Because bad things, as long as you live in the world, bad things will happen to you. But you reach this point where the love has kind of infiltrated your existence, because you, like you said, you took the message and you walked along the path, and you stand at this point, and in front of you is all this space, and you realize that you are free. You have the liberty to execute love in a free way, in a caged way. And the love speaks to you, and it says, I love you. Now love others.
Yeah, I have the words that tell how that is to have deconstructed the containers that we don't need, restricting it and constricting it, and therefore instead to make constructions that vibrate, that do not constrict and jail. Stop here.
Stop here?
Yeah, I wrote those words over the top of my previous imagery that describes what you and I just said.
This morning I was discussing the joke of death.
Well, it looks like it's time to start the stream. I'm doing the first draft on this narration, the Secret Squad version 1, stream cut version. Now, it's going to be a highly entertaining listen. So much that I'm just going to listen to it while playing some WoW for a little bit. The thing is, there's more. There's another ending. I just created it. This shit right here you're looking at right now is the punchline. Stop here. So I'm gonna finish creating the highlight cut, the draft I was drafting. But in order to convey Minecraft correctly, I have to explain what just happened, how it happened, and write the instructions so that I can adventure using this build again. We are now doing the commentary run on the first version, V1, for yesterday's narration session, which is only an old script, but punctuated by something that was written that same day. It is necessary to complete this in order to walk up to the entry point, the portal, where you begin the ending. You have to take this path to see this ending. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now, this font is a little bit out of control. Size 256 is the default size. Spherical being. We live on a sphere and we are composed of spheres. Now, no, wrong one. I guess we can use this one real quick. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Now, the new stream rules are actually a set of instructions. I went ahead and basically overwrote all the old rules. There might be a couple little phrases that I kept. But it's now a statement about creativity and lurking. This is because lurking is the essence of creativity. I'm making something to lurk in, so you're invited too. You can lurk here now or later. Okay, so technically this chapter has a part 2 or bonus segment, which contains Q&As specifically about identifying and escaping from the type of relationship abuse which it's a very, very, very specific type of mental health crisis that is extremely challenging, and there are lots and lots of information about it on the Quora site where people pose questions or question interested people create answers for each other. So I gathered all of my answers, or most of them, most of the ones I find to be the most significant. And that's like the secret extra component for this that kind of gives you the full details that it requires to see the whole picture of what I'm doing with this craft. The sub-premise of abuse healing is a vital fragment in the construction of the harm reduction position. To establish the position of a person in the abuse corner or trap. A place of high infringement and high pressure on your mental well-being. The super premise is the emergent wealth of our organism is trapped and suspended. We are in a heart attack, and the result is widespread mental illness suffering, decay instead of creating. Reference point here is back to some of the first sentences that I wrote about the mind open spaces and walking down the steps from where I am now to get down to understand where I was before, ultimately taking a look at my inner child. Those thoughts are expanded in the first voice episode, where I kind of started writing this set of scripts right before I thought of the 3 chapters, 3 overworlds. let's see, so this one, okay, this one's made out of some additional items that I began. This is about the battle shout mythos as well, that I start getting into it, which I've talked about a great deal in the new scripts, but this is the old. This also contains an introduction to the next overworld, which is a story of my deaths and respawns. It looks like that's where it just pivots right to. Harm reduction and the awareness toggle. This is a title image. Let's just place it in the narration folder. Yeah, this is it. Story outline, comprehensive reflection. This one's complication, the one that goes all the way down.
When I first learned the piano and played these wretched scales, the teacher beside me had a pencil in her hand and she hit my fingers every time I made a wrong note. The consequence was I never learned to read music because I hesitated too long to play the note on time. Because I was always, is this pencil gonna land? That gets built into your psyche. So people are always, although they're adults, nobody is clubbing them around and screaming at them any longer. They hear the echoes of that screaming mama or that bombinating papa in the back of their heads all their life long. And so they adopt the same attitudes to their own children. And the fast continues.
This volume's intentionally quite low.
Because there is no, I don't say that you shouldn't.
But I have the headset turned down.
Children, if you want them to play the social game. But if you lay down the law to your children, you must make provision later in life for them to be liberated. Go through a process of curing them from the bad effects of education. But you can't do that unless you too grow up, see? As we grow up. Says I, including myself. It's a publication. So that is the thing. Now, therefore, in the Zen scene, you would think that the master, as we know him and as we read about him, is an extremely authoritarian figure. That's the way he deliberately comes on at the beginning. He puts up a terrific show of being an awful dragon. And this screens out all sorts of people who don't have somehow the nerve to get into the work. But once you are in, a very strange change takes place. The master becomes the brother. He becomes the affectionate helper of all those students, and they love him as they would a brother, rather than respect him as they would a father. And therefore the students and masters, they make jokes about each other. They have a very curious kind of social relationship, which has all the outward trappings of the authoritarian, but everybody knows on the inside that that's a joke. Liberated people have to be very cool. Otherwise, in a society which doesn't believe in equality and cannot possibly practice it, they would be considered extremely subversive. Therefore, great Zen masters wear purple and gold and carry scepters and sit in thrones, and all this is carried on to cool it. The outside world knows, oh, they're all right. They have discipline, they have order, they're perfectly fine.
Alright, now we can listen. This is the cool part. Okay, now we will listen to the one called Complication, and then the story Comprehensive Reflection. Now, this particular video I added to the Adventure School 5 stack because this episode, or this stack, this session, so to speak, is about being vexed and being trapped and hitting the end of your ability to think you can control anything about anything. The essence of hitting the end of the road, where you literally are in what's called don't care, where you literally can't exert any more belief in something going a certain way that's positive, or in an outcome happening that has any kind of harmony. That's the essence of where you are when the essence of the Sly Man takes over. When you stop trying, and you stop not trying, and you're magically boosted into this secret area essence. So Jordan Peterson was saying mental illness is not really the root thing that we're troubled by. And I want to talk about this in the context of my education monk aspect of Adventure School, and of what I would like to do. Like Watts says, what you would do if money were no object. This is what I've been trying to think about doing for at least the last 6 years, but much longer in the broad scope of things, since I was in corporate hell, saying I wanted to do something more relevant to teaching and to artfulness and to surviving human struggle by way of creativity and art. In high school, I had exactly one course that was actually centered in this, called Humanities, and it was a combined study between writing / creativity / music with history and literature. Basically was the fourth one. It was those 4 subjects put together. Music, literature, history, and writing. It was the writing part of it specifically. So Jordan Peterson said that mental illness is an issue, but the real issue is complexity, complication. And I would rephrase this in terms of our social contract, which is essentially, in essence, at this moment, you're not free. You have to purchase citizenship. You have to purchase freedom by way of obedience and by way of finding a way to sell out your time. Lots and lots of it. It costs a lot of your time in order to succeed at buying your freedom, your citizenship. And we're constantly forced through the I forgot the term Alan Watts uses for it, in Coincidence of Opposites, where he's describing this exact problem in the social contract, and it's more whimsical the way he describes it, by simply presenting the fact that we're going along thinking that we're going to get to the great, that we're doing travel across a long distance to go somewhere great, that where you already were was great. The Jordan is artful. That wasn't supposed to happen. We have to fix this. Look. noise is recording because it's really amusing, and it also made me completely forget what I'm doing. However, I'm able to recover this information. So I guess the word completely wasn't completely accurate, now was it? I'm editing this highlight and creating something at the same fucking time. So sit down when it's time to sit, so you can get the message. When you sit down, when it actually is time to sit, and you stop here, there is something amazing. You. That's what this means. The door. It's actually constructed of the two sides of it. I have to press two keys to make this door. One of them's me, the other one's you. Now let's fix the error. To make the rest of this highlight, I have to zoom all the way out. No, I just glitched it. I forgot to push play first. I need it to play very near to the end of the stream. Yep. Okay, now I click the end button and now we unglitched it. So now we have a continuous 4 hours and 18 minutes, because the rest of this only needs to contain the narration part, the part where I'm speaking. Other than a couple parts where I'm describing trying to speak. Usually I cut that part out, but leave everything else like I'm describing what I'm doing to the computer, but the part where I describe trying to speak, I chop that out. That's literally what I'm doing right now.
Essence of hitting the end of the road, where you literally are in what's called don't care, where you literally can't exert any more belief in something going a certain way that's positive, or in an outcome happening that has any kind of harmony. That's the essence of where you are when the essence of the Sly Man takes over. When you stop trying, and you stop not trying, and you're magically boosted into this secret area. So Jordan Peterson said that mental illness is an issue, but the real issue is complexity. Complication. And I would rephrase this in terms of our social contract, which is essentially, in essence, at this moment, you're not free. You have to purchase citizenship. You have to purchase freedom by way of obedience and by way of finding a way to sell out your time. Lots and lots of it. It costs a lot of your time in order to succeed at buying your freedom, your citizenship. And suddenly you're about 40 years old and you realize you got there.
This is an edit. I will change how the final episode of this video, stop here, reads by modifying this part right here.
The way he describes it, by simply presenting the fact.
And the really, really interesting thing is that the only way to make this edit, I cannot save this edit into a highlight using this highlight tool. to make this edit, I have to make some announcements about it right now. I have to stop right here and just sit here doing nothing for a minute, and then cut the part out that I was doing nothing from this next highlight, so that I can remove 2 seconds that I don't want to listen to. I want to connect 2 different seconds together real quick. A very short skip instead of a long skip. We're only going to jump over one thing right here. We're not going to escape the whole boundary. We're just going to make a very, very slight crop to the sound for this part. When I do this,
They're great.
preview it like this. And we're going to get slightly more than this during the cut. But in this case, only thing I had to do was sit here and talk about it for a minute, and then put up a jump scare. Check this out. That's a jump scare. You have to click the little button to turn on the light and see if there is a ghost. And if he's there, you leave the light on. You go straight in. And everybody knows leaving the light on also means you need to close the door. And use some of your power. Then you click the light on again and see if the ghost is still there. If he is, well then leave the door closed. If the ghost is gone, because you looked at him, see what I'm saying? You looked at the ghost, now he's gone. That's all you need to do, is acknowledge that it's there. Now I know where to restart the highlight for that version that's going to just play the narration for narration compilation reels. But this video contains the entire parable. It's the whole fucking picture.
Thing. Realize you got there and you don't feel different, and it's the whimsical feeling about realizing you cheated yourself the whole way down the line to think you were going to some great thing, and instead of dancing while the music was playing at any given point along the way, that you weren't taking a journey, that you weren't doing travel across a long distance to go somewhere great, that where you already were was great. Jordan Peterson says that the problem's complication in terms of catastrophes, disasters, pressure, difficulties. This is the flaw in the social contract that forces you to go have your time bought out in order to purchase freedom, in order to purchase just a little bit of relief. It's not enough relief. It's not enough simplicity. It's too much pressure. It's way too much fucking unwellness and discord in terms of the things that aggravate mental illness. So mental illness is not the root problem. It is simply the thing being provoked to greater and greater heights by a system that absolutely will not permit us to have rest. This system expects us to live as if we're not alive, in constant fear, in constant anxiety, and in constant struggle and panic to keep on going on. And go on as if death doesn't even exist. You're not even allowed to acknowledge death. You're supposed to go on pretending like it doesn't happen up until the moment, whoops, you accidentally are gone, and they hide it from you. He goes into this in The Inevitable Ecstasy and a couple other talks, and the Joker, he mentions it offhand, that he's
The Undertaker is a guy who sweeps you under the rug at considerable expense. You're not allowed to live as an alive person. You have to go like a zombie, but death and rest isn't allowed either. You're not allowed to give up your responsibility. You're not allowed to have freedom or play or rest. You're not allowed to have a simple life. The system does not tolerate the existence of those who don't belong. That's what's wrong with the social contract, is it requires an endless amount of panic and attainment in pursuit of some great thing, when in actuality it's just obedience to authorities and rulers. And if you're the wrong color or the wrong gender, you make too much noise, you're not allowed to have a bad day. They throw you away for it. They try to come and punish you, and make someone out as a criminal if there's a crisis. And I didn't see that angle of the problem per se until I was in the domestic hell situations that entailed this. That entailed me getting pushed into this corner where fascists wanted to put me in their for-profit jail system just for trying to save my family. And the only reason I was in that corner is because of the way this endless pressure cooker aggravates all the mental illness triggers of my significant other, who just simply can't have peace. She's not allowed to be valued for what she does and what she wants to do, and neither am I. What we want to do is education work. We don't want the endless pursuit of obedience to rulers so that you can buy some tiny little 5 minutes a week sovereignty that's basically not even a whole weekend that you get anymore. We don't want that, but the system is aggravating all the types of mental illness that are triggered, that have paranoia and fear and anger, and PTSD situations where we can't have peace. And we need to have a society and a social contract where peace is the center point, where you are invited to play the game or any of the games available if you would like to, and where nobody comes out and tries to force you. They don't force you into the street out of housing and out of health if you can't pay your obedience fees, and they don't come force you into a jail if you have bad days every now and then, or you're trying to help somebody who has bad days in it. And it just aggravates it to the point where you're angry and you've made mistakes too because you have flaws, and all of a sudden you're being charged with crimes for it. It's bullshit! And I'm fucking tired of this social contract, and I want to start a monastery that is essentially a school. Education from the standpoint of the monk is a combination of total sovereignty, which is an underlying pillar of total wellness, growth which only happens of itself. It can only take place when there is not force and complication and pressure on top of you, requiring you to go be distracted with attainment and obedience and giving up all of what it takes to have rest and to have nourishment and to have real play, the real contemplation for the sake of what is the basic essence of an enlightened state, of the feeling that you are in the ultimate mind, the ultimate experience, that you're already there, that you are it, that you're not off trying to attain it through some complicated, long, drawn-out process. And that's where Watts brings a heavy amount of roasting toward religion and toward psychotherapy and toward judges and court and authorities and all of it. He embodies the Joker, who is a jester against all forms of stringing you along in complicated attainment to try to keep you there, to try to
draw the process out and keep people as their students and as their their clients under the psychotherapy guise, or keep you in the jail system as an incarcerated, institutionalized person, or the education system. All of it. He's the only fucking voice other than George Carlin who has ever been able to voice my basic fucking principle of life. That the only action that qualifies as teaching is subverting the authority that pulls you away from well-being and peace and calmness and rest and celebration. It was the ultimate realization that my life purpose, so to speak, is artfulness in support of celebration and against non-celebrators, and celebration crashers. The Nazis, the fascists, and the fucking miserable people of this world who can't let others alone, who can't just allow nature to happen of itself, and they have to boss and own the destiny by force. We have to fix this social contract, or the entire human system is completely collapsing. And this pandemic situation is forcing, I think, the elites to make concessions they never ever otherwise would have had to make. They never would have had to admit that it's a game that deliberately throws people away for disobedience, for arbitrary reasons, and not allowing them to have bad days, and not allowing them to have rest, not allowing them to have wellness by way of trying to charge them for the simple right to exist in such a way that just doesn't make sense. It's a self-frustrating game rule. We can't keep living like this as a human group. It will not work. We will all fucking go extinct.
Alright, that's that one. Now
I started creating with the intention to tell a story, I didn't know what the story was yet. I knew I had some story to tell, but it had no definition. In other words, I contained the blocks that it was made out of, or spelled out with, the symbols, the raw experience, the unspeakable, in essence, realities that I have walked through, my deaths and respawns, the questions I have traveled through to bring us this message. 3 chapters existed up to that point, which roughly consisted of the giggler in church, my child self, the trauma breakpoints of the death of my mother, and my own death one. The first mystical experience, constituting a near-death experience I couldn't understand. Part 2 sort of begins in that breakpoint, which is the whole time period from then up until I grow bigger and I wander aimlessly in a kind of locked up discontent. Terrible Lie is the anthem song for a radio version of this whole proceeding. Angry at the cults I had escaped from. And this spans all the way up until I reach the very tip top of adulthood. So basically age 11, all the way up until I am late 20s. Essentially, I don't think this part even breakpoints until I'm 30, when I break off onto my own and I have left the corporate hell that I was in, after kind of very subtly realizing it in full, that I wanted to do something constituting teaching, constituting using my skill of creativity and of walking against corrosive or suppressing forces and institutions. I refer to it as humanities skill, referencing the class in high school before I left high school, combining disciplines about history, literature, writing, music, and art outside of music. Music was its own scope, and then there was an art tier, and then novels and reading and writing, language arts was combined into it. So a series of events led me out of the domesticated and corporate employment life, the corporate hell, and the fake life of a person on a profession path that just didn't make sense. I later encountered Matthew Silver and his words when he said, I knew I didn't want to make the grade, I didn't want to be somebody, and I broke down.
My breakdown was expanded out over a very long period. It took me a while to fully complete the breakdown. But essentially, that's the third tier, is as I enter the state that would enable me to complete the breakdown, I entered a state of a heavy fall in love. A heavy encountering of exactly what I desired. A person with as much of an educator's authority, disruption, creativity, power, mother energy, matching my own. And so this third tier is the transition out of the disgruntlement, the locked up dismay, into me at my worst. Really the trial pushing me to the point where I would be open for the real arrival point, my creative arrival point as a monk educator. Beginning to search for the story overlaps in that phase. I was still at my worst during that moment. That part of it is called the quest. And I was doing a graveyard shift, delivering the state newspaper, and I've got a piece written that talks about this time period. I've got to add a few other little details in, but this time period where the quest has begun, but I'm still in the worst moment, the number 3 in the story, experiencing it. But starting to search for the story is what had to happen. I later distilled this into the insight that questions asked in the right way are the means of adventuring, of actually going. If you decide, and by doing so you would determine the question that you should be walking along, you quest around. What are you searching for? What exactly is your question? Which was the question I was asking myself. I was kind of speaking to me as I'm ready to transition out of the locked up dismay. I started asking, just what the fuck is my question? Just what the fuck is my story? What the hell's going on here? Because I was super duper boggled at that point, and I had been through a variety of struggles related to my PTSD triggered panic attacks, which I never realized that that's what it was prior to that. Ultimately, I had medicinal experiences, sort of beginning with ketamine in the emergency room. I then completely stopped use of alcohol and began pursuing the idea of neurogenesis and psilocybin to continue along that same question path, knowing that it would allow me to heal, which seemed to be the main thing in my question, is how do we walk a path of healing. But that was only a subtle piece of it. I didn't really realize the full question, of course, until I reached the boom, the point that all of that was leading up to, the real changeover from out of the me at my worst moment into the answer to the question, the thing following the quest, which is Unit 5 in the the timeline and the outline tiers here. Unit 5 is interesting because it is actually, it's like the two doors room in the Coda puzzle. One door on either side. It's a dark room inside, and there's a switch on the inside of the first door. That you have to press while the door is in motion in order to progress. Number 5, it is that I've found the answer, but I have to also exit this place. I can enter this place, but just entering it is nothing. It's just a blank room with nothing in it. But essentially, that moment is the battle shout trip, the mushroom trip in May of 2019, where all the pieces of information and experiences, I was able to scan them, or you see them arranged into the real interpolation of their total meaning. And gained the battle shout, the answer, what I'm searching for. What I'm searching for is you, is your true, unspeakable self, your ultimate reality self. You. That's what is to be found when you battle every boss and monster to the last floor of the dungeon and locate the treasure. That treasure is you. So realizing that was a place, it was an arrival point, it was the entryway of the arrival point, like level 1 in Doom 2, the entryway. It was just the opening into the underhalls and the rest of the game that is this, the Monk Education Adventure School. But exiting that room was a year later. Well, not a full year. I mean, it was a couple of months. Experiencing the first LSD trip. In my angriest depression, alone with my questions, I saw me. I saw that I am the sky. We are all falling here. There's no getting back up onto the cliff edge. Once you fall, in the motion of the fall, I saw we are not separate. I saw you, and by seeing you, I saw me. I only saw me because I saw you. And I realized it. I'm the sky. We are all falling, and there's only love here, which constitutes the short interval between Battle Shout and the I'm Sky moment. Was walking through that door and exiting it. Walking forward from there leads me to seeing just what exactly is this through this door, and it is the Zen paradox and the full utilization of the huge gaze to scan all these things, to see the only objective that there can be, growth of itself when you're freed from illusions and from coercion systems. Liberation. And so that's the story of how I found the story, and how having found the story enabled me to come to the entire vehicle of my creative arrival point, which is ultimately the only means for me to tell it, for me to do anything. The story is about my creative emergence, and it takes place through the knowledge encoded for me and left for me by Alan Watts, by his creative arrival point. I feel a deep connection, as if I was either extremely close, have lived the life that he lived in either a direct or a very close indirect way. And his words explain 100% of the feelings of my heart, which ultimately is the monk's enlightenment, the Zen medicine for coercion and illusions that are worrisome, that are the definition of anxiety. And all of the insights contained between the I'm Sky trip moment and now the creative arrival point with Adventure School and the rectangles that it includes that are in my inventory for the character Fool the Great are blocks that I can assemble in any way. Any assembly of them tells you reality. It's like combining different lights and different viewpoints to see a different piece. It's like the ship of the mind in Cosmos, the Neil deGrasse Tyson reboot, where he can go anywhere to any time, and that vehicle is a metaphorical to the Zen paradox combined with the huge gaze. And ultimately the potion rectangle, which is the only one that refers to experiences happening in front of your eyes now that damage you or that suppress you. The potion is the Slime Man solution to those damages, to heal yourself, to suddenly leave with no need for a prior announcement, without having to think about it, deliberate, because that's too slow. Reality's infinite fast. The Slime Man escapes the boundaries. He outwits the devil by a secret tool, the potion. You click on it when you've taken damage, and you can heal the damage, and you can succeed rather than being killed and wiped in whatever boss or enemy encounter that is that damages you. Because you don't have to accept it. Once you understand that peace exists, your rectangle potion is the tool, the means by which you simply refuse the non-peace state. You go to peace, even if you can't exit where you are, like i.e. in the jail cell, where I really first began the first granule of this realization, and realized it was the cheat, it was the secret hack, it was the special ability. I realized that within a meditation state. Now that's an outline of how I may structure the 3-point story video / essay, which consists of part 1, the harm reduction platform, which represents the beginning of when I began to think about what was important to me, what I wanted to do. It was always harm reduction. I just didn't have all the words and ways of thinking about it because of my illusions and my immaturity. Number 2 is basically the narrative of the mystical experience with small details as necessary to tell
those realizations out of those first 3 chapters. And at my deaths and respawns, the questions I've traveled through to bring us this message, how and why I created my words. And the final one is the video game koans Zen Paradox story, the full unfurlment of what I have as insight through the game parables for this arrival point, and ultimately the adventure school creative arrival point final message, because there's 3 messages. The adventure basics are those 3: the awareness of, and then the celebration of, and the creativity, the crafting of, expression and resonation of your inner reality, your actual full reality self that is manifested spontaneously and not under coercion or under false illusion and forcing. Those 3 items constitute what it is for adventuring when you are deciding to travel from your experience. You already know when you are going, you're actually doing the traveling, what it takes to actually go ahead and depart from what you already know. And the doing, the XP, what it is that happens after you've done that, when you're in a place that you don't know, when you're having the true reality spontaneity. Because that's the thing about spontaneity. It reveals what you don't already know. It's the new XP, it's the treasure. It's yourself, your fully actualized and seen self.
Okay, that was the end of that one. Pretty good comprehensive overview of what the 3 chapters are. In chapter 1, it's necessary to establish that and kind of describe the components, which will be developed in a lot more detail, some of which has already been kind of grafted in the introductory way in earlier narrations. So, as I mentioned when I was first looking over this, the super premise of this segment, chapter 1, is the emergent wealth of our organism is actually trapped. It's suspended, we're in a heart attack, and the result is actually widespread mental illness and suffering. It's decay instead of the creating that we are wired for and were built for as human beings. So I've got this intro segment establishing definitions, basically. Punchlines, definitions. Intent or impact here. The most important thing here is to frame all of the rectangles. We can't start talking about them the way the rest of the script does unless we start with these high-level definitions. So the very first foremost definition you need is mythos. I've spent some time talking about this on the development streams and on some of the scripted ones. I'm sure I've covered this a couple times, but why is this important? If you heard the expression, the picture is worth 1,000 words, then the story is worth 1,000 pictures. And mythos is like 1,000 stories. It's a story dash picture. And we've got an interlude of the Zen Paradox door, or the blue monastery entrance door. Both of those images are basically interchangeable in my monk mythos. This is the first rectangle. The second one is double bind. Most importantly, you have to act before you think. How can anyone do that? In other words, it's not possible to decide beforehand. That's too late, because reality is infinite fast. How can anyone do this? Answer: there is no way out of the bind, technically. The double bind is a foundational tool for unselecting a game rule. Without understanding double bind, we cannot make any assertions about illusions or reality. You have to act before you think. How can anyone do that? There is no way out of that bind. Well, there is actually one way out, and it's a rectangle. Zen Paradox. Basically, it's a pause function, solving the fact that reality is infinite fast. My story is about these rectangles. Then we have a Watts clip. I've played it a few times in a couple of the compilations so far, where he's asking why do we put ourselves in boxes. In a later essay, I'm going to talk about this particular aspect of the exact meaning, the way we can talk about both the benefit and the negative way of using boxing and containers. The key is the voluntary element about it. I'm not going to replay that right now, I'll play it later. So this is basically Battle Shout plus There Is No Teacher plus channeling insights. Mutual arising is completely foundational to being able to look at the Zen paradox. Emptiness as a frame that lets you see something at all. The narrative voice of me, regular me, the person, is trying to de-obfuscate this to explain that I can't teach you how to do this, but my entire project is to amplify your seeing you. Because I don't exist unless you're seen. So rather than teaching you something, I'm actually learning about you. By standing here where I am, I'm crafting this reality right now, what's contained inside of this video right here. This is education content that will never change. It is what it is, it will always be what it is only. However, your version of it, the impact and the relevance and the contextualization of it to you, when you experience it, that's the act of reading the book. That's the paradox essence. It's you that I'm looking at, even though this is my mystical experience tale. When I began this channel with the Battle Shout concept, I didn't have the definitive statement of my purpose. Any being denied their sovereignty cannot access growth. Therefore, we uphold the immutable, sovereign right to be a school and oppose all coercive damage or suppression by any individual or authoritarian, corporation or state or other type of bureaucracy. Any type of force exerted on us will be refused as a human right. So my position as a mystic educator is really that of an ANCAP. I claim total sovereignty to be a school, a fair use, social organism cultivation entity. We hold these truths to be self-evident. So, this is a blueprint for a school with total authority to refuse the infringement upon our well-being of a bad social contract. The point of this blueprint is to give it away to you, for you to be allowed to pick it up and use it, and the whole purpose of it is the fact that we are allowed to pick up such a blueprint and use it to increase our well-being and stop infringements against it. Identity, a completely voluntary group. We display this statement as the same blueprint anybody could pick up and similarly invoke. We uphold the right to operate this way with full liberty. If any coercion or violence is done against this, it's illegal and unethical. Sovereignty is intrinsic, and we're born with this right to assemble together for well-being. No forcible infringement of our education practice will be accepted. Period. Acts of force against this well-being constitute declaration of war on the innocent, autonomous people of this planet. We will first withdraw from the tyranny seeking refuge, but if faced with no withdrawal opportunity, we have to lay down our lives defending this cause. The death of George Floyd is the mathematical sentence of this. We refuse any degree of weight pressed down upon our survival and growth. From murder done in the open by false authorities to the concealed violence, artificial impoverishment, slowly suffocating us by denying our intrinsic sovereignty. Trevor Noah put it in words, "We're furious now for those who've died and the ones who don't die." I say, coercion is cancer. Harm reduction is the name of my platform because it specifically calls out the damage we can agree upon as harmful, regardless of individual beliefs or principles. The name embodies my refusal to be a bystander to gross negligence and toxic abuse. So my channel is about mental health, creativity, and inner peace. My mission is to spread harm reduction until it's the standard, ensuring sovereignty for anyone who seeks growth, uninfringible by Nazi force and violence. That's the education of a monk. Liberation. The educators said to the Nazis, "Let us have funding to choose school or homeschool up to that point." Nazis said, "No, we require young people to attend government programming facilities." The educators replied, "No, because harm reduction requires not allowing the kids into your violent custody." Informed by my childhood as a misunderstood neuroatypical, my harm reduction politics are three main pillars that are based on what went wrong. First of all, I was put on Ritalin at age 6, as if my difference was a disability rather than a talent. And next, I was forced through toxic authority institutions, the Mormon cult and the US government school. I wanted to follow my fascination and grow in my own way, but staying home where I was free just wasn't allowed. My battle shout is for gifted kids. I'm speaking for every child that's being harmed and destroyed by Nazi institutions and false scarcity, which are the standard of citizenship here for all but the most privileged, who withhold the natural flow of the social organism's emergent wealth. A social contract which recognizes that education and growth is owned by individuals and not attained from authority or gatekeepers or via obedience to any particular interest or influencer, we would say, CEO, boss, etc. Any of these words, they all describe the invalid, the mechanism that absolutely will fail us and will extinct us. You don't attain education or growth from that. You own it within yourself. This is a social contract that actually will permit the existence of outsiders and not promote crowd and bureaucracy cancer, if it actually recognizes that that education value is literally just owned by individuals and families thereof. Never, ever any brand or state entity. Viable technology is that which completely eliminates the previously heavy overhead, cost, or burden, and so it is adopted widely. It makes the previous solutions obsolete. Thereby, decentralizing money is the viable tech of connecting all previously viable tech with the possible beneficiaries. That's an inclusion innovation. Harm reduction platform is completely non-ambiguous. If your behavior channels harm reduction, you're a healer, educator, or warrior, defending precious young. If you do not channel harm reduction, then you are a Nazi. You are dealing damage to the young instead of defending and adding to them. This is a concentration country without adequate harm reduction. Literally is designed to exterminate anyone who doesn't belong, instead of protecting the most vulnerable, the youngest, or the talented, or offering a completely voluntary social contract. These are the two defining elements of what harm reduction is: protection or care, and basic sovereignty, the resisting of coercion and force. So we need to support the idea of humiliating an enormous narcissist without even using our MVPs, just to prove our point. And a side note here, of course, this was written speculatively, and of course now we have done that. And we're having an inauguration tomorrow. Whether you like Trevor Noah or not, or whether you particularly like people who are more left-leaning or not, what Trevor Noah said when he was talking to Bernie is truth. Getting Biden to say it will get it recognized as normal. Doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on. That's the message of the whole Biden movement here. Either we stage unprecedented uprisings now, actually right now, not waiting, or unite our support behind a guy who's only symbolic of our discontent with harmful authority and institutions. The current non-president who was holding office had only worsened. He has never ever reduced harm, and he will cause more harm before this is over. That was a prediction that I wrote. Also, in late September, which came true multiple times. Especially when you think of the 3,000 plus deaths per day we have in my country from the pandemic alone. So we must get rid of him. How to remove Trump? Trump removal service. Wealth is manifested in real material. Bezos and all the rest of the wealthy elites' failure to circulate the gains of emergent wealth is effectively a cancellation of the wealth it could become. That's anti-wealth, anti-material. So he is a dark overlord. His command is over an enormous nothing. Harm reduction is UBI, analogous to the breakup of the entanglement with toxic institutions and government controls, with a payment specifically for well-being we desperately need to regain after the harm of Nazi institutionalized unwellness. That payment's literally to recoup the damage that was done because the governing institutions have had a massive, unprecedented, history-making and history-breaking institutional failure. On the show The Newsroom, which I excerpted in my Volume 4 wrap-up compilations, they spent some time exploring this and talking about what's the meaning of institutional failure, because it highlights negative consequences to individuals who are merely innocent workers. They're not complicit in the destructive nature of the harmful overlords in these situations. That's the main thing with institutional failure, is that you're not able to pin the crime to individuals in a worker capacity. You have to pin it on the larger influencers and authorities, essentially, who are making negligent decisions. I started there, and I kind of weaved that thought further into the basic declaration that consent to be governed is literally predicated on uninfringed well-being and open sovereignty, where you actually have the freedom to choose as an individual for yourself. And you can't do that if you have to get your income from a ruler. You just can't. Okay, so this is a slight summary and follow-up to all of those details. That's why I placed it here later in the script, ultimately. Okay, this is a description of what it is, a short voice narration providing context to my primary disagreement with the current social contract. Kinda did this one a little bit already in the Minecraft session 1, but it was mostly through compilation rather than narration. What I want to do is fundamentally education work, building curriculum, holding gathering, guardianship, and direct providing of resources and support to my kids in a homeschool and to anybody who would show up for such support to a monastery setting. So I'd like it to be more of a monastery attached to the homeschool, so I may invite students, which would be anybody, any age, can participate in this. It's a wholly open door process with rules that cause the main piece of the place to be respected. So the idea here is to upgrade the social game so that we may officially permit the existence of the outsider and abandon the exclusionary idea that people should be blocked from having housing, that they shouldn't be able to have shelter just because they chose to show up at the place that the shelter is and be sheltered by it. If you take a look at Starbucks' third place policy, that's where my idea for this began. They were the first mainstream situation to rise in support of my basic platform. They said, no, you don't make a purchase to be our customer. All you do is show up and refrain from infringing the purpose of the space or peace of others. So my monastery is a super third place. Okay, we'll skip the next part because I included this one in the basic creative arrival point and follow-up narrations. My business is people's well-being, essentially. I want to create the space for leaving this social contract as the main function of my work, of my endeavor, day by day. Monastery is the warrior's house of gathering. It's the base, what school actually means, the warrior's house, because he's protecting the younger ones from all the threats and all the bosses. He battles every boss, taking aggro and defending all the young and vulnerable, leading the group so the newer ones may learn to get XP. He carries a rectangle shield which is simultaneously used to block threats and damage and also reveal reality, to reveal the talents and buffs available to the group to the younger, less experienced ones. It is both a viewing tool and a defensive tool. Okay, next this is a summary of the timeline, my mystical experience, education foundation. First thing is George Carlin explaining why education doesn't happen and why it never will when we have owners that don't want free-thinking populations. I obtained this information subversively by accessing his content via the earliest file-sharing software. This was the era of the internet around Napster and Kazaa applications. I was around 16. Number 2. Exiting the cult I was born in. Though I couldn't express any of the mystic perspective other than being super angry that they brainwash kids with defective authority hierarchy and a faulty idea of their own power, that they have to go attain it somewhere by pleasing outside authorities and being obedient. So my objection was wholly centered on the false attainment premise being force-fed throughout the culture. I just lacked the words to explain it, other than I don't need someone else telling me what to do in order to have an acceptable or excellent life. Number 3. I'm growing angrier and angrier that the same faulty premise also exists throughout my culture in the form of authoritarianism, where the right to exist is weakly predicated upon a purchase that actually is only symbolic, with the real requirement being obedience to a false authority and attainment hierarchy. Initially expressed by detailing the way the role of lifeguards and caregivers was directly penalized during the process of requiring everyone to obey an employer or ruler, i.e., being forced to adhere to whatever schedule the employer is trying to make them do. The result of this is depleting their mental and emotional resources in such a way that we literally see a murder and suicide crisis unfolding in a steady acceleration of mass shooting and other violent outbursts. Up to now, we've seen it lead all the way to armed insurrections. I iterated on pointing out that the only emergency our society recognizes is ones where your vitals measure over a certain threshold. It ignores any crisis that does not, whilst conveying you should hurry up and stop existing if you have a problem, rather than being willing to help. We don't have healthcare, and that starts at the very beginning where we don't have access to shelter as a condition of a place you need to sleep. I like how Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot. He explains that your room and what organizing it means is it's your place to sleep. You have to start with what's the purpose of it? It's somewhere to sleep so you can function. Well, and so what's your function? So you have to answer that question. You need somewhere to go, and you need a place to be for your stuff for when you go there, and you need a purpose for both places. He lays this out in great detail. The point is to have healthcare, to have any of this in a way that makes sense, where if you have a bad day you actually can get help and it's not predicated on just blood coming out of you as a wound. We have to stop ignoring this problem and consider the human rights question about healthcare and housing. So I'm getting madder and madder about it, but I was able to express that problem back in 2014, 2015, even as early as the Occupy Wall Street situation back in 2011. We started creating this movement, I would say, and I have a clip from Michael Moore explaining that we're going to invent democratic economics. It's very, very relevant to where I've arrived with it creatively. Regardless of whether you like people on the left or the ideologies thereof, this ideology stands separated on purpose, just grafting in relevant details to what true ANCAP liberation capitalism will look like, and what it means for it to look like that as a human rights-centered social order. So number 4 is, of course, my mystical experience emergence, preceded by thoughts about nostalgia and the gratitude glitch, and then the outro page of the battle shout and the I am sky trips. Then the Zen paradox fully materializes in my conscious reality during a depression moment with suicidal ideation, in which I replaced all interaction with social organism or media with Alan Watts' lecture study, long play, accompanying mostly WoW adventure game meditation. So Adventure School was born. Yeah, that's the UI is very, very effective. I was able to remember exactly what I need to do next. It's just a little indicator that I switch off when I'm ready. I'm skipping forward now in the second part. This is listening to the Jordan Peterson lecture. I don't want to hear any bullshit about Jordan Peterson. I've gotten some, well, tell me the bullshit, but, like, let's talk about it. Because the thing is that what doesn't make sense is if you don't want to talk to me because I'm talking about Jordan Peterson. Like, people were acting like that lately. Not super recent, but it's happened. And the thing is, I'm just listening to the metaphysics of what he's saying. and I don't have any way of knowing the entirety of everything he's ever said, so I'm just exploring it. And anytime he says something that adds to my message, I pick it up and I show it to you. So, what I'm doing is channeling the game information there. I'm bringing the information in the Jordan Peterson lecture because it casts a light, allowing me to see something. And I'm trying to show you what I see with the light he's casting. Do you see what I'm saying? So we listened to this for like 30 minutes. And I basically just have to find the part where I actually continue the narration. And the narration I did about the Peterson part, I'll cut that separately. Because that's not what Stop Here is about. Stop Here is the counterpoint to the Peterson lecture. It's like the punchline, which we'll get to. We're getting to the ending. This ending doesn't go on much longer. We're almost there. We're really almost there. I'm going to attempt to skip this forward and also recap my chat at the same time. Chat contains new narration, some of it highly contextual to what was being said in the moment I typed it, so we'll have to do a third pass to get that. That won't even happen in the second pass, that'll be the third pass. This is the first pass of editing right now. So the awareness toggle is like, this looks like where we were trying to go. Oh, I have arrived. Accidental awesomeness. That is the big oof. Oops. Wow. What is inside the surprise? Get ready for the jump scare. Boing? No, there will be a jump scare. Boing. Good morning, are you here? Stop. Here. It's the secret area. Stopped. So listen here. I enjoy listening to this so I can read the book that it is. I have to sit here lurking and listening to it in order to get my own fucking message. Time to sit. That means stop here. Is it time to sit? How to recognize the situation. How do you recognize when to stop? And we have Jordan Peterson on the definition of progress. Discovering a place to stop. But anyways, this is about the ending. The ending line's the punchline. That's why we're stopping here. For the ending. Endings. 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 What does it mean? What are endings? What is stopping? There's one thing I want you to see, which is there is a conflict when someone wants to erase others. So we want to stop the one doing that erase thing. This is why liberty is a situation wherein the truth hurts. Because you then have to be brave and say, no, everyone's allowed. We're not erasing anybody. While holding up a shield between the threat and the innocent. My shield is the Zen paradox. I am holding it, but I am also standing on it. The tank is the monk, showing what are the talent specs. How do you get full HP? How do you even navigate this encounter? But also taunting the boss and keeping his damage off the noobs. There's a point when I took the Peterson image off. There it is. The reason I did that is so I could do this thing I'm trying to do right now, is get to the part where he was done talking the first time, and I decided to put him back on, but we need to grab the narration between there. Yes, right here. This is it. Listen. See what I did? That's for the other part. But I actually have to turn cable B back on now. I did not make a UI note for that. I just looked at the OBS UI to determine that. That's called checking your UI to see how much hit points you have and if anything is fucking switched off that's supposed to be on. That's the basic fact about making your build. It's troubleshooting. I learned it while doing an IT career like that.
The whole culture says
before you. So you don't want to do that. You just want to instantly open Stanley's door and instantly Stanley's free. That's not an adventure. It's not going to happen like that.
the whole culture says, well, you're more likely to be able to function properly in a good, stable job if you're the sort of person who knows how to go out in the world and forage for information usefully. And I think that's very much analogous to the hero story. It's like you go out and you search the unknown to find something of value. And so fundamentally that's what we're doing in the classroom. And the reason we can all organize our behavior is because we accept that framework. Consciously would be we know how to articulate it. Unconsciously it's, well, it doesn't matter, we know how to act out the patterns. Whether we can say the rules or not, doesn't matter. Same as a wolf pack. We know the procedures, and you could describe them with an articulated value structure. Let's take a break. Okay, so let's go back to the complexity problem. See, I actually think in some sense it's the fundamental problem. When you read about the terror management theorist types, they think that death is the fundamental problem. And that's a good argument because it's definitely a fundamental problem, but I think it's a subset of the complexity problem. And the reason I think that is because sometimes people's lives become so complex that they'd rather be dead. So, and the reason they seek death through suicide is to make the complexity go away. Because complexity causes suffering if it's uncontrolled. You know, things just get beyond your control. And that can happen, you know, if you're hit by 3 or 4 catastrophes at the same time. You know, maybe you have, the political system collapses, there's hyperinflation, you lose your job and you have someone that you love or 2 people die and maybe you get cancer, something like that. Like that, those things happen to people and they just think, well, there's no getting out of this, like it's just too much. And you know, one of the things that's very interesting about being a psychologist is that what you learn if you're going to be a psychologist is that people come to you with mental illnesses, and that's almost never true. People come to you because their lives are so damn complicated they cannot stay on top of them in any way that doesn't make it look like they're just going to get more complicated. And so then that causes symptoms. You know, it's like there's this old idea, it's sort of a metaphor for genetic susceptibility. Take a balloon and blow it up until it's beyond its tolerance, it's going to blow out at the weakest point. Well, that's sort of what a genetic susceptibility is. If I just keep adding complexity on top of you, at some point you'll blow out at your weakest point. You know, maybe you'll get physiologically ill, maybe you'll start drinking, maybe you'll develop an anxiety disorder, maybe you'll get OCD, maybe you'll get depressed, whatever. There'll be something about you that's the weakest point, and if I just push, that's where you'll blow out. So that's a mental illness, but those things almost never just happen. Sometimes, but not very often. Usually people have just been hammered like 2 or 3 different ways, and then they collapse in the direction of their biological weakness, and then maybe you put them back together, but it's almost always a complexity related phenomena rather than a mental illness related phenomena. Not always, but almost always.
So, I've discovered the lecture here that contains this thread that kicked the focus. It sharpened the image into the final thing I'm trying to describe here. It's this lecture. And he talks about gaming and adventuring and a couple other really important things in this lecture. So I find it highly important to create the part 2 of this, but this is part 1 that we're in right now. So now you can see that this one, number 2 in the first overworld, is strictly and specifically about both the complexity problem and the situation it is when you're sitting there, you're at that end point. You're like, what? I fell off the ledge. I'm at the bottom. There's no way to get back up. Can't play anymore down here at the bottom of the monitor's room. And you're sitting there. You are... You didn't mean to stop, okay? Do you understand? You didn't realize you were about to stop. And then you had to notice, like, oh, look, I stopped. What? So see that. Take a look at that. What does it look like?
It doesn't make ability whatever times, but put them back. It's always a complexity related phenomena rather than a mental illness related phenomena. Not always, but almost always.
There's just one of the edits I need to do for this highlight to work out. No possible announcements can be made about this particular edit. It's 100% completely... The only thing I can say about this particular edit is nothing. There's nothing I can say about it. That's the punchline. It's a long edit. That's what I can say about it, okay? I was lying when I said it was nothing. It's a large amount that I am cutting out, and I'm not going to watch it in any fashion, other than this one time to edit and remove it. That is the one thing to be said. I am typing a message to send when I finish doing this part so I can cut this out of today. Stop here. Of course, there will be an uncut version of Stop Here where you will be listening to this, explaining to you that this is the uncut version you're listening to. Because I cut this part out of the version everyone else is listening to, except for you, who came here and found the one that's uncut. Good job. This is a secret area. There it is. Just found it.
But almost always. But those things almost never.
It's 8 minutes that we just skipped. I purposely left in a few points where you're just listening to me type, because I like those quiet places where your ideas are flowing. Now I'm typing out information about what I'm thinking about. I'm not going to explain what I'm typing. I'm just going to put it on the screen instead. The screen's too dark for me to tell if it's actually legible. It's actually a little bit illegible at this size that I have the window. That's okay, you're going to have to stare at this illegible text. It's pixelated just to the degree you can kind of have to guess at what some of the words say. You've been debuffed. Purpose of this one is narrated content. But remember, it's being left in because I like these parts where the information's just being canvassed. So I didn't cut this one out. I only cut out the other part. Except for one quick modification. It's really that long. Alright. Now we catch the final piece that goes here before the ending. But the literal action of exchanging the information looks but energy of our. You're going to select still there and it's still itself back and forth. Gather up, plan. This is the thought that you get to when you realize this exchange of information is the currency. That information is the real currency in some sense, some fundamental way. The number that's money, no, not real. Completely imaginary, completely approximated, means nothing. The information that transcends numeric information in the sense that we've contextualized it through the lenses of a game world, a person, an environment for that person, and where you're simultaneously looking out at reality from the game world's context and you're looking in at you through the lens of the game or the tool or the story, like Jordan Peterson was just saying. You're getting a sight of what there is, of what it is. That's the real thing. That's the real reality. Particles that is currency that we're trying to exchange, that we're wanting to exchange, and that by doing the exchange of these details and information particles, we're fueling basically the bio machine that we are, the bio computer that your fucking brain is, that you are as a human animal. That's what it runs on. It runs on information. It runs on emotional currency. So the secret, the thing we're getting after, the thread we're trying to pull on is how to be all the way here. How to be fully emotionally authentic. How to access anger and use it correctly. In a way that doesn't leave you so fucked up you can't function. Because if you refuse your anger, that's what's going to happen. You have to actually implement it correctly. And all the emotions, you have to not refuse any of them. In the action of refusing, I liken this to speeding on the highway. The asshole who's speeding trying to hurry around everyone else. The thing about that is, what that does is puts you in a position where everybody's in your way. You're trying to hurry around them, they're in your way. You're choosing a behavior where you're putting everybody in your own way and pissing your own self off, and you're dumb. You're an idiot for doing that. But you might have fun doing it. So like there's the two ways of saying that or looking at it. But you might also cause danger or injury or harm or regret or sorrow with that action. So I think of that behavior in a motor vehicle as something cosmic. It's like playing hardcore mode. It's the Joker mode. You literally wield the power of life and death when you pilot a large machine that's capable of crushing animal life. That's just what it is. You're choosing an action that's mystical in a really interesting, calamitous way. Jordan Peterson talks a lot about our capacity for malevolence or for malice, for action that is destructive and for angry, evil behavior. He really gets to the core of confronting what is the dark part of being human, and what does it exactly mean to have confronted that, to have taken it on and battled the boss within you and defeated it. What does that even mean? How can you do that? That's kind of my question too. So in that earlier narration I played, that was from the very beginning when I wrote these seed scripts. And I had been writing those for about a year at that point before it finally got to the point that I could see what I was looking at. And it's 3 different chapters that are differentiated in this specific way. I'm showing on screen right now the main summary overview of the first one. And I have a similar item like this for the second and third that describes what they contain, delineates what their differentiation is that causes the 3 to be separate and causes them all to not just be the one script. Because as I started writing the script, I was like, no, this is another script, this is another script. I kept finding more differentiation points and title points that allowed me to sort the information and organize my information into these different word sets. Yeah. I'm saying, look at this information. Let me get some of your information. Like, let me gather the information that only you can contextualize for me, and let you get some of that information that I can only contextualize for you through my way, allowing us to make that real perception of this infinitely complicated, pulsating reality we're looking at from these 2 different vantage points. It gets to the meaning of a unity of self and other, to understand the currency about that, about saying, I need to get some of your information, and I need to show you some of this information over here, and that's what we're trading. That's what it is that we're able to get from each other that is uniquely valuable, in such the way as to say, only you can get this information, only I can get that information, and only through the transaction that is this human contact can these 2 informations become something that we have crafted. So I think of human contact as literally a craft, as an act of bringing forth something that doesn't get made unless you put all the materials into a list, think about it, and experiment and do radical iteration and figure out how to combine them and which elements go where, and try it, keep trying it, and keep doing it, and keep rehashing it, and throw parts of it out and bring other parts of it back over and over until you figure it out. That's how you do it. That's what your human contact process is going to consist of. It's going to be exactly like creativity when you get to it, which is why at the end of this whole thread I think of essentially this model, the idea that you should make a craft and you should make a stream and you should tell people what you think and what you feel. And like Peterson says, you have to find your own words or you don't exist. The reason for that, the reason to do that is because the reason that rises above any other kind of goals or reasons you might go along behaving one way or the other in the suffering vehicle that's called human life is so that you get the power, you get the energy of human contact, the affection energy, the love energy, where existence is love. This is how you do it. You figure out what you're trying to say by reading the book that is what you're trying to say, and then the more you figure that out, the more you say what you're trying to say better. Other people can hear it better. They can see you. They can, by seeing you and hearing you, they are able to figure out what they can make better, because all these perspectives illuminate each other. And that's the mechanism of a buff that you cast outward from you that you click on the button and it gives somebody else a benefit. You click this little spell and it casts the benefit. It comes from you. It creates a benefit. The benefit helps you, and it also helps other people. And then with those benefits, they can do the same thing. They can cast their buff, and that's how it goes. This is how the game is carried on.
So, okay, so now you got this complexity problem, and you think, well, you deal with it conceptually. And that's sort of akin to the idea that it's belief systems that protect you from death anxiety. The ideas are roughly comparable, but
Something's so fucked up. It's not the bit rate. It still looks kind of fucked. I think it's the way it's playing back to me that's fucked. That's fucking weird. Alright, I know how this is going to be clipped. Back to the part where we're asking what this guy's deal is. What the hell is this guy's deal? Alright, maximize this narration. No, this is the wrong one. Don't maximize that one. This one, the rule for all containers, the paranoia conundrum, the secret squad narration. First of all, please do not underestimate the peril of, please beware of, the wrong weed. You might be avalanching stress with the wrong weed, where another one may synergize and medicate your profile of stress encumberment optimally. Just try a different one if you're not having a good stress situation. Difficult to identify that because stress makes you way, way, way less aware of what's going on. So now let's think about the value of flipping from comfortable to risk. Essentially the action you feel when you play a video game that is going to delete your save file if you mess up and get defeated. Or if you mess up driving a motor vehicle and cause bodily harm or your own death. Flipping from comfortable to risk brings you over an authenticity threshold. The problem is when you trap anger in place, that stops you from actualizing. But if you learn that authentic spontaneity switch and then use it for diffusing the fear to become the creativity exertion, then you got the message. Now, I studied losing my mind and caught this in particle form, but now I finally have been able to scan it and see the relation between the particles and what they depict. Magic eye. That's the huge gaze. Side B is a koan solution. When you tell someone, yes, it's stupid, go ahead and quit if that's what you want. It secretly discourages them. They feel freer. This is seen in the new film Soul from Pixar, and also in Alan Watts when he explains the question about giving somebody permission to commit suicide if that's what they want to do. There's a whole joke about it, a little bit into the beginning of the Web of Life. So, question. Question asker says, I am going to do something ridiculous and life-destroying. This is somebody having a difficult experience, the experience of the complexity problem, and this is what they say. So this is the answer. Okay, yes, we believe you. We can see that your situation is very exist. But you see, anger blocks you from answering this correctly. You get hit by the special attack. It's fucking overpowered. It needs to be nerfed. That is the trap of anger. Its only use is to flip your awareness toggle. Then you need to refuse to be contained in that place. You have to exert liberation. Basically, you have to decide to disband the container and float freely out from it. The call is over. You are imprisoned in the booth. Image interlude of the cursed phone booth liminal art. You actively enact hanging up the phone, and boom, you've opened creativity.exe. Who's shooting me? Jesus Christ. So, you actively enact hanging up the phone. You open the creativity.exe. You rescue you. This is the model I discovered by rescuing me from an oppressive cult. This is also the rule for all containers. You have to liberate you from it. There is no other way. This also corresponds to the rule for all terrors from Alan Watts in my curriculum, but in an opposite way, because the rule for all terrors is you go straight in. You confront it. This corresponds also to the Jordan Peterson dragon parable, or like a boss dragon. Enemy that you have to confront, you can't just ignore it. But confronting it is what fear is taking you. You're afraid to do it, so you won't do it. That's the fear mechanism inside of anger. Since I cannot seem to access the intelligence of this behavior, I will have to exit the game, fairly inevitable. That's the fear mechanism inside of anger. Since I cannot seem to access the intelligence of this behavior, I will have to exit the game, fairly inevitable. So then, this is the arrival point. The second person perspective is to watch you and be the liberator of that one that got hit with the whack anger attack. In dungeon raiding, you have this immobilize debuff. I'm thinking of the beginning, the first boss in the Black Temple raid from this expansion, the Burning Crusade. But your teammates just need to run over and defeat the trap. That's how you get out of it. So your second person is just as good, you or family. The secret squad is you and your... Question. I am going to do something ridiculous and life-destroying. Answer. Okay, yes, we believe you. We can see that your situation is very exists. But you see, anger blocks you from answering. You get hit by the special attack. It's fucking overpowered and it needs to be nerfed. This call is over. You're imprisoned in the fucking phone booth. Actively enact hanging up the phone, and boom, you've opened creativity.exe. You rescue you. Secret. It is where you are. That is where the secret squad is. You plus loved ones. Stop there in the human contact. Pause.
Hello?
Yo,
Can you hear me?
yeah,
What's up, dude?
I gotta tell you something today.
Okay.
Hold on, I gotta say. Today is a celebration, the renewal of our purpose and vigilance thereof. Because,
Because Trump is no longer in office, you mean?
yes, because of this, I will not fail. The power of my belief will flow forth to buff our group, and they will each cast their buffs back. In the collective name of all of our faith, this is the way. This is how you do it. You send out your love, and it reaches people, and then they can cast theirs. That's what you do with your voice. You speak the truth to people.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that.
That's the truth. That's what the word faith conveys.
Hold on, Okay, dude. Sorry about that.
I'm sorry, but being sorry isn't allowed.
So here's... Oh, shit. Here's kind of what I'm hearing from you. So, like, oh, evil and death are not going to prevail in the end anyway, even in the dark times where it seems like it will. And then related to that is that the way that you spread love is by loving other people, and that allows them to love back. Like, I believe that we love because God loved us first, and so when we watch, it's like that. It's like, you ever go to, I mean, maybe not, but whenever we do Christian services, there's a person lights a candle, and then you use that candle to light all the other candles. Everybody holds a candle, right? And to me, they've always described it as being representative of, or I interpret it as being representative of when you find truth and love, and someone shows that to you for the first time in a very genuine way, it kind of confirms, oh, I can do this. I can show truth and love to other people. I'm not stuck inside whatever bullshit I think I am. And am I getting it? Am I grasping the concept that you're trying to convey?
Yeah, not only are you grasping, what you're doing right now is creating our message.
Okay.
Because your voice is a part of this message. Because there is power in the words that are created to show love to people.
I absolutely. I fully agree with that. I love that. Yeah, absolutely.
I needed to tell you this so I can now add your voice to it.
Oh, like you were recording.
Your voice basically creates words. I create recordings so I can figure out what I'm saying. And when I do that, I can then create a reference file, basically, which is a thing I listen to on repeat, the same way I listen to the song I'm writing on repeat.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a term for this that I now use the term lurking for this. I sit in the content and I fucking sit down in it and I stay there. Do you understand?
It's like, usually I'll get like a rough idea or something and I'll listen to that for a long time. Just
Yes.
I'll get a rough idea and listen to that for a long time. Well, it's like with anything. Like you listen, it's like imagine a fractal, right? And you know how it zooms in forever. I feel like with art, you're looking at when you start, you're trying to draw the base one, and then once you get that down, then you zoom in and you do it again, and then you zoom in and you do it again, and you zoom in and you do it again.
Yes.
And it should never be perfect, but there's a point where you zoom in far enough, and you're like, okay, this is the layer that I've achieved, the message that I'm trying to convey. So, like, you know, you listen to a beat over and over, to write lyrics to it, then you put the lyrics down, you listen to your take of the recording over and over again until you say, I don't like these parts of the take, and then when you go to do the take, you do it each in parts. You do it in one take like you did it last time. You do each bar, each section in a different take, and then you mix everything. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do, and I have to tell you a secret.
Okay, I love that. I love a secret.
It's always perfect. You are scrolling in a fractal. I've been watching fractals for the past couple weeks. Non-stop. Not non-stop, that was only a joke.
At night, I turn on the fractal videos. I fall asleep watching them. In my dreams, if I don't dream of them, I wake back up, watch again.
I wake back up and resume watching, and then I enter the dream state inside the fractal.
Epic. I love that.
I've been studying fractals since I was a middle school kid, but the point is that I also have had 2 dreams about this. So these are the words that weren't in the dream. Don't tell me we can't change. He says, don't tell me we can't change. And he said that we will have liberty and justice for all. And you want to know why it's true?
Why?
Because there's a secret squad. When somebody's doing the action of love, what they do is they listen to people and they send that information that came from the people to everyone else. So they transfer the information. That's the transaction. So what's happening right now is an idea of leadership that is being done in that way. This means that intelligent caregivers are speaking what should happen, and it's gonna fucking happen. I've never felt this. And my buffer has overflowed.
Buffer?
I can't buffer. I am 100%.
Like, you no longer need to sit and think to load the next concept.
Yeah, some energy is vibrating into the channels that I can see so visibly. It's not literally visual. It's the way that I perceive it. It's solid. I'm the gong vibrating this. These words tell the vibration, the noise of the gong.
And you're implying that what you vibrate is love.
And this is what I wrote. Oh, I already told you that one. You were scrolling in a fractal. This is how you do it. You use words to liberate with the action of liberty, which is sharing. The thing where you give because it gives somebody a benefit, not because there's something that could be returned to you.
Right, exactly.
That's the action of liberty. To have liberty, we share. That's how we have it.
That goes back, that's like the idea of if you love yourself by loving others. Like, when you choose to love yourself only, you don't realize it, but you are enslaved to that process.
Yeah, if you try to do anything but that, what you're doing is being a container. You're being a jail, and it traps something that only has one purpose, which is to flip the switch to give you the love.exe, the create.exe. You flip that switch, you launch that program, you destroy the container, you don't contain it, you let it float away. That's liberty. Doing that is the liberated thing.
And I don't mean sorry like I feel bad. I mean, let me be courteous so that I was not informing you. Pause.
I'm just standing on top of this surface. It's made out of hexagons. So, hexagons are the mathematical representation of liberty, of the perfect unity.
Why do you say that?
Well, it's science. The
What
hexagon,
about circles?
the metaphysics of a hexagon is... There's a
Oh,
9-minute video on this that I didn't create, but it tells you my message. So I'm adding it.
Like chemical compounds tend to form in those circles, and they tend to try to form.
It's not even that. It's literally the... Well, yes, it is that, but like... When you say the word chemical, what's in my mind is the love information that makes us alive. That we are. Science has been able to observe this pictorially, like make an image of the motion, like the gravity that was being depicted in Interstellar, for example. Well, science has been able to draw a picture of the human organism, like doing the thing that builds the information that allows us to be a living, like our vessel is alive, like what life looks like. And when we have looked at the shapes of things, in order to comprehend that, like what am I looking at, and then do some math, essentially it's told in 9 minutes. I cannot even paraphrase the punchline. It had all 9 minutes are required, almost, to get the main punchline here. But the floor, the ground you stand on is like hexagonal. There's 6. It's about the 6 aspect of the math that goes into it. The metaphysics is more important than the exact number part. The metaphysics is what I'm talking about. I'm just standing on it because I'm the gong and my noise is occurring. So like it's extremely intense, which is why I had to tell you this today.
That's good.
Because I am the gong, I feel this reality. I had 2 dreams about it, and the words that are being said right now are what comes before that dream. When I said I could see the future, but I can't see the part that comes before it, that's what I meant. I'm seeing the part that comes before it right now. And the only way I can put that in words is to say that I am the gong, or I am the game, or I am the celebration. I'm the thing that's making the noise because that energy is flowing into it. So I make the recordings and it allows me to figure out what I'm saying, but I also know what I'm saying when this happens, when I'm ringing, because the gong gets hit. There's only one hit, but the ring is long.
Yeah.
Both things happen. Then I study that. I have a recording of the ring. It was already long, but then I can lurk inside of it. That allows me to do what I call studying it or reading it. Then I read the information, and when I've read the information, I understand where that floor is that's made out of hexagons, and I climb onto it and stand on it. And while I'm standing there, I hear the next one or see the next one. That's how I've composed every single line of musical thought that I have ever composed. What do you feel?
Imagine a piece of clay. It's like a jar, and it's been made this certain way, and the shape is nice, but there's no light in the room, and you can't see it, and it's impossible for there to be light in the room. There can only be light inside the jar. But I feel like the light is put inside the jar, and when it shines, you see the cracks in it, and you see its shape, and you see all of that. But at the same time that you're seeing this object, you're also seeing simultaneously the thing that's behind it. Even though you're not seeing the light per se, you're seeing it push through the object and show the beauty of how what some people may look at and say is deterioration is actually beauty, and that the process of time has created something that can only be expressed through having light shone through it. So that's how I feel. I feel like I'm dust. I am a piece of I'm a piece of carbon. Nothing about me is complete or should be whole in any way. But when I let light shine through me, then it shows off the glory of all the things that are beyond me.
Yeah.
And people see that through me, even though it isn't me, and yet it is me at the same time. And I think that it's not just in a physical way, like people see my appearance. In fact, it's the opposite of that. It's more the emotional expression, or again, like love, like you said, and those kind of things that are grasped inherently. And even as I do something that I want to do, that I know that I should do because it is good and right, that which is love, whenever I try to express it on my own and I go about that, I do express it imperfectly, but even the imperfection of my expression shows off the glory of the light that is behind that.
Yeah. Listen to this. I wrote something about this. So your eyes sense the light? Correct. Right?
Right.
So there is a part that you sense life.
Okay, yeah. What's up?
Do you see that?
Yeah.
Can you see what I just said?
Yes.
So I wrote this at the very fucking beginning of what I'm making right now. It was like the first thing I wrote about this. And you just described that first thing. The flow of life to illuminate, so you see.
Yeah, life is such an abstract concept. You can't really express it the way that you would express light, but
it's so abstract that it's like the idea of finding out what it is. You illuminate what was there. You get a picture of it. Like the concept we're using to say visual sight. So I started out with this idea, like, what are you doing to sense life? The beautiful thing that existence is. How are you doing that? Or what's doing that? Or how can we do that?
Are you asking me?
No, I'm telling you the question that began this. Which you just said. Everything you just said goes straight into the bucket where that question lives. It's perfect. You get the picture of something that's so beyond what you think is before your eyes. You're standing on top of it, and it's eternal, and you're seeing the eternal goodness at that particle point where you are. That's what you're seeing. The transaction of the information, so you know that goodness of what has been made, what is there. That's what value means. So when I talk about liberty, I mean share that with somebody. That sight. See, we'll look at this fucking eternally incredible thing that is right here. You're seeing it now. You're literally seeing it right now. It's right here.
Right. Like, and again, I have to go back to like a three-dimensional expression of that because the idea is so abstract.
Do it.
Because light, like you can't hold light.
Yes.
You can express it. You can't really describe it, but when it shines on something, you can tell what it is. And it's like that. It's like even though everything about me is meant to decay, even though my love in this life and this world is temporary, even though everything that happens here is temporary, and and temporal. There's something about expressing love here that expresses something that is eternal.
Yeah,
Because
that's what you're doing.
Love, the way that I understand it, is something that is both temporal in a very elementary way, in a mundane way, but still beautiful, but also eternal. Love is the one thing that we express here that will last forever.
Yeah, precisely. That's what it is. And the sensation speaks like, can you see a noise? If it's the truth, if it's love flowing, I can see it. That's what I can see. That's what the gaze is looking at. The fucking eternal good thing. So you think you're in the dark, you actually just didn't see the thing yet, but like, that image just allows us to describe the seeing. That's all we're doing, describing the seeing.
Right.
So it's literally, to me, what the sensation of heat whispering means. That's what I have. And we just put all the words, the consequence, the words that are consequence of that heat whispering image. That's what I'm talking about with you, is the heat whispering. I'm seeing the noise of it. So it just seems like love is noisy, and the word noise just indicates the fact that we're aware. Oh shit, we're aware. This has a lot of exist. It has so much, it's almost too much. That's what means the buffer is overflowing. It's too much exists. It's fucking beyond. It's completely eternal. Complete, like it's finished and continues to be finished. Do you remember that phrase?
I think so.
I know that's in the mythos that I'm studying. Something that's so finished it continues to be finished and is completely the thing we see, what it is. That's the action I am speaking about. So that's why we are dissatisfied with the actions of an institution called religion. Because what we're doing isn't done in an institution sense. It's done in the sense of right now you're looking at.
It's like you described that when you do things for yourself, you live in a cage. I feel like because if you truly are loving, no one needs to tell you how to do it. No one needs to tell you how to love. You are shown how to love. Someone loves you, and then you feel that.
Right, you send it out, and then they get it.
Love is not a list of rules or a list of actions that need to be followed to complete the task. Love is the opposite of that, and I think that's why people hate religion, because religion says, I'm going to teach you how to love. You don't teach somebody how to love, you show them what love is.
Yeah. So there's no teaching, there's only that thing where you show what it is. You point,
right.
You create the ability for it to be perceived. And you do that using an action that lets your truth be looked at. It lets your book be read. When you do that, you create something that can be read, somebody can read it, that happens, that's the transaction. They can then do the same exact motion from their center point, create that book, you read that book. You have now exchanged the power of your inmost love.
I feel that.
And after that part is unspeakable, because all the speaking is what took you. The speaking walked you up to that point, and you're standing there. You have the message, and you're standing on top of it. And what's in front of you is space. What's behind you is the message that took you there. That's a quiet moment, and heat is whispering. I created the words to say this.
I'm trying to grasp what you're saying. I think, for me, it's like the idea that I feel like some of us are lucky enough to be protected from the evil that the world has, but so many of us come into the world and it changes us. It does these things to us that we don't like, and so that makes us feel like we need to be defensive. We need to build up all these walls. We need to live inside this cage. And maybe we do things for ourselves, but in our minds, we're protecting ourselves. And we meet people who express love without that. We see love being expressed without that cage. And maybe we've seen love before, but it was always through this cage. And so we kind of say, okay, well, love isn't real. It's this fake thing, or God isn't real. Religion is just all lies and this and that. But we finally experience someone expressing love without that cage, and we say, okay, that's really unique. I've never felt that way before. And not only do they seem like they're no longer trapped, but what they did has made me feel some type of way that I really like. And you almost have to have this faith, like, this isn't just a joke. And you start looking into it, and it's a slow process. It's not this, all of a sudden, I saw love me the other day. Now everything I have in life is totally solved, and I figured everything out. And you kind of go through this process of surrendering all the things that you put up around yourself to protect because you were not protected. And you reach this point where I feel like you're talking about, which is you're able to love, and maybe not everything, but enough of your cage is removed that you can feel love in this really tangible way, and you can love at the same time. And it's almost as if the love itself is like a being. It's like it's separate from you, and yet it is with you at all times. It inhabits you. It touches all the parts of you, and you know that even if you go through a period where you try to go back and build the cage back up, that you're never going to be the same again. Even if you try to harden your heart, you're never going to be the same again. Because bad things, as long as you live in the world, bad things will happen to you. But you reach this point where the love has kind of infiltrated your existence, because you like you said, you took the message and you walked along the path, and you stand at this point, and in front of you is all this space, and you realize that you are free. You have the liberty to execute love in a free way, in a caged way, and the love speaks to you, and it says, I love you. Now love others.
Yeah, I have the words that tell how that is to have deconstructed the containers that we don't need, restricting it and constricting it, and therefore instead to make constructions that vibrate, that do not constrict and jail. you put it like this, and so I just wrote this 2-word. Stop here.
Stop here.
Yeah, I wrote those words over the top of my previous imagery that describes what you and I just said.
This morning I was discussing the joke of death. And it's going...